Hello, friends. Welcome to CareersTalk. I'm Suresh Sharma, an agile consultant based in Netherlands. And today we are diving into something that could be the key to your success or the reason your organization is stuck. So now you have implemented evidence-based management. But now what? How do you make sure the data you collect leads to a real improvement instead of just more reports? Scrum Master, this session is for you. If you are swamped by too much data, struggling with decision making, or seeing little impact despite all the matrices, you need to stay till the end. We have special guest Viktor, who has written an insightful article on what comes after implementing EBM. So he will help us understand how to use data effectively, improve decision making, and build a culture of continuous learning. So by the end of this session, you will know how to turn data into an action and make a real difference in your projects. Let's get started. Welcome, Viktor. Thank you for your time today.
Good afternoon, Sunan.
Okay, so if you allow, shall we start?
Absolutely.
Okay. So my first question is, many organizations struggle to make sense of the data which they collect. So how can a Scrum Master ensure that an EVM leads to a real improvement rather than just more reporting?
This is my important answer, and you probably, if you've seen our previous episodes, you know what I'm going to answer. But it all goes back to pillars. So inspection, transparency, inspection, and adaptation, and the data leads somewhere behind transparency and inspection. Actually, making sure that we are collecting all the required data, and not only we collect this data, we're also trying to get inside this data and actually understand. So now what? Many organizations doing the mistake that is they're just collecting everything. Lead time, cycle time, all sort of diagram, burn down charts, and they just absolutely struggling with this data. They have no capacity to process it. So how it works for me and what I usually recommend to the teams that I'm working with is to actually focus on one bit at a time. But remember, we are working in Agile, and the concept of iterations and concept of continuous improvement is something actually quite good for us. So what I would recommend is to start bit by bit. So evidence-based management is basically talking about current value, unrealized value, ability to innovate, and time to market. So you can focus on one item per in specific moment. So let's say you're trying to understand your current value. So how many tech debts you have? How many customers you have? What is your revenue? How are you? What is your, you name it. Literally anything that can help to measure your value, this is your metric. And after collecting this data, you're not going further to start measuring time to market and ability to innovate. You're actually trying to pause and make sense of this data. And only when you've understood which data works for you, which metrics are actually useful, and how you can use them to advance, pick one or two or three that you are actually able to sustain on the longer term, and we are actually able to observe and make some sense out of them. And only at that point you are able to move on. Probably the most common mistake that companies are doing when they are starting to measuring their work is they have such amount of data that is just not possible to process. Yes, maybe these days with AI and all the fancy tools, it's getting easier and easier. But if you're still working in an organization that is operating on spreadsheets and operating on Jira dashboards, you are much better off measuring less through iterations rather than measuring everything at once.
Great. Yeah. So it's easy to get lost in data collection without extracting meaningful insights. So I believe that Scrum Master should guide teams in focusing on matrices that are directly tied to the outcomes rather than just tracking numbers for the sake of it, right? So we should encourage team to define key performance indicators and that align with the goals, right? So for example, customer satisfaction or the cycle time or the delivery throughput. Now this can ensure that the data is tied to the outcome that can derive the improvements. So instead of just tracking general velocity, maybe we can focus on lead time or a delivery quality, right, which can provide actionable insights on how well the team is delivering value to the customer. So yes, I truly agree with on this with you, Victor. Okay. let's move on. So you also mentioned about retrospective in your article, that retrospective is a starting point. Now, what are some specific ways that team can use your retrospective to get some actionable insights from that data? Because sometimes Scrum Master, even they are not even aware about that there are different kind of retrospective, right? There are retrospective when your team is new, there are retrospective when your team is mature, there are retrospective when they have to gather some data. Yeah, sorry, Victor, over to you.
So I agree with you that you kind of should be using retrospective as your toolbox, and depending on the situation and depending on the current challenge, you have some sort of flexibility as a leader in the team. While you can't really completely command what they're looking at, and you can't say them what to do, you can help them, guide them, and you can propose some specific formats that can help in specific situation. So what I like to do is kind of shuffle retrospective so that people do not stuck with the same format forever. And it's really very, very common that you join the team and you understand that team is doing what went well, what went bad, and what we need to stop, or whatever 4 different columns they have on the table. So here is actually quite an important point, that you can use the data and you can use retrospective, not only how kind of a look back, but you can also use a retrospective um, to focus on a specific item in a specific point in time. So let's say you've agreed to measure your tech debt, and you can announce to the team that after this sprint, we are going to have a retrospective to look into our tech debt and try to understand what have we done and why, for example, our tech debt went from $20 to $30 during the sprint, or something like this. So how I would recommend to use this data is actually focus on one specific item during retrospective, almost prohibit team to speak about something else, and try to focus on one item without losing the focus. By the fact that this is kind of flexibility of this retrospective will be somewhat narrower, to help you to uncover some potential results. Of course, if there are some burning topics, or you feel that something has happened in the team that requires a conversation, you can expand retrospective or keep this conversation outside of the retrospective. But why I feel that retrospective is a good point for evidence-based management inspection, and to actually take a look at specific metrics, is that this is one of the events that is happening every 2 weeks, and every 2 weeks for an hour, or better to have for 2 hours if you have such a pleasure and you have the time. This is happening every 2 weeks, so this will become a real habit if you have some part of retrospective, or even the whole retrospective actually focus on a specific metric. And while you are looking often enough, you'll have the possibility, you will have an opportunity, and moreover, you will have enough, almost a playing field, to try different stuff, change something, go through the sprint, see how it changes, and then try again. More opportunities to inspect, more opportunities to fail, although also more opportunities to learn.
Correct. So, Victor, just I want to add like two things really work for me in this data-driven retrospective. So, first of all, if we can visualize the trends in the matrices, so data from previous sprint can show trends and different patterns that can help the team to identify the long-term issues and areas that need attention, right? So maybe we can bring some relevant matrices like lead time, cycle time, defect rate, or customer feedback to the retrospective, and then we can visualize them in charts or different graphs. So for instance, you can show a trend line of a defect or a cycle time over several sprints. Now, if that defect rate has been consistently increasing, this can be a flagged as an area for further exploration during the retrospective, right? So team can discuss some potential reasons, and they can brainstorm different improvements. Other thing which I really think that do wonders, if we can start data driven questions, if we start asking data driven questions, so see, data can prompt the team to think critically about their process and what's working, what's not working. So if we can frame question around the data to guide the our retrospective discussion. So for example, let's say, why did our cycle time increase in this sprint, or what caused the backlog to grow? or what is the root cause of drop in the customer satisfaction, right? So if the team see a spike in a cycle time, the scrum master can prompt the team with questions like, okay, what happened in the sprint, like that causing this delay? Was there a bottleneck in the process, or was there something else, right? And if we can correlate different matrices, again, we don't have to see matrices in isolation, right? So looking for correlation between different matrices can reveal some underlying issues that are not immediately visible, right? So if we can compare different data sets, for example, cycle time versus team happiness, or the defect rate versus testing time, to look for different patterns that might explain the certain trends. So if there is a correlation between a longer sprint cycle and a higher defect rate, the team can explore whether slower progress is affecting the quality of the work, and then they can brainstorm different ways to, to improve both the speed and the quality. So yeah, these are the few points from my side, but then there are many, but then I think we will cover in our next questions. So yes, Victor. Okay. Okay. You also mentioned about multiple sources of evidence in your article. So indicating multiple sources of evidence can be challenging. So how can team balance the customer feedback, the financial data, and the team matrices without getting overwhelmed, Victor?
So I think it's really getting back to the point from the first question to the second question. So of course you can measure all sorts of metrics from all sorts of different places, from different users, scenarios, journeys, etc., etc. But it's really important to try to understand what are you trying to achieve. Because if you focus, let's say, on this during this iteration on cost save, uh, yeah, then probably there are maybe some of the metrics that you don't really care at this point. Or for example, your main concern from the customer is actually to make sure that the API is working faster. Then maybe you don't really need to focus on metrics that are measuring satisfaction from the front end experience. Of course, depending on the size of the team, you might have a better capacity, you might have a better bandwidth, and you actually can focus on more data sources at the same time. But at the end, it still goes to the work in progress limit that you hopefully have established by this point. And how big your team, how big your organization, it doesn't really matter. As soon as you lose the focus, as soon as you lose the main metrics, the main idea that you're trying to implement at any given time, you're probably going to end up in trouble. So how to not to get overwhelmed? I would say try to limit. How to limit? This is where it gets really complicated and really hard. So ideally, your organization should have some sort of a project goal or project vision that everyone is aligned and everyone is trying to achieve and working towards this direction. And while you have established some sort of north star for your organization, that would be the point where at any given time you can focus on a specific item. So I know this is not easy, and I know in the modern world where we have a data from every source, you have a data from your laptop, you have a notification from your Jira, you have a notification from the customer, you have some bug reports. It is hard to focus on something specific, but I believe the most important and crucial bit here is actually to start limiting work in progress somewhere. It is hard, and sometimes your heart will go absolutely, yeah, your heart rate will be beating, and you'll be stressed because there's so much stuff going on and you're trying to focus on the specifics, but this is a necessary evil that you need just to adapt and just go with it. It will be hard at the beginning, but as soon as you will see results, you'll understand that it actually worth it. It is worth to focus on only one specific item, and it's really worth to measure only one metric at a time.
Okay, just a small point over here. If we can able to create a data hierarchy. So let's say when we having multiple sources of evidence, multiple sources of data, a data hierarchy can help to prioritize the most impactful information. So if we can classify our data source based on importance, so for example, customer feedback. Now that's the direct impact on the user experience and retention. And then we have, let's say, team matrices that will reflect like how effectively the team is delivering the value. Then we have a financial data, so that shows the long-term sustainability of the product, right? So if the customer satisfaction is low, we focus on the customer feedback first, and then we can review the team matrices for some potential causes, right? And then of course the financial data can help to quantify the consequences of improving the customer satisfaction. And along with that, if we can have a right tool for integration, I think you also mentioned about that the proper tooling is again very important to visualize and correlate all these data sources more effectively. So if we have some tool like Power BI or Tableau or a Jira to combine all these different data streams in one platform, so that can provide a unified view, and then that can make it easier to see how the customer feedback, the financial data, or the team matrices can relate to each other. So we can create some sort of dashboard that can bring together like the customer satisfaction surveys or the financial performance like ROI on maybe sprint velocity or the quality matrices. This allow the team to make a informed decision without feeling overwhelmed by the individual data points. So that's something I just want to add, Victor. Okay, great. Let's move on. So the next question is, what are the biggest mistakes organization make when they're trying to implement a EBM?
So we've discussed that not focusing on one item is probably one of the common mistakes. But for me, that would be it's actually gathering the data without any specific purpose. Everyone is measuring data. We have these cycles every now and on. Everyone is doing internet. Let's do internet. Everyone is doing AI. Let's do AI. Everyone is doing blockchain. Let's do blockchain. Or everyone is doing my favorite NFT. Let's do NFT. The same has happened with the metrics. Everyone kind of understand that we need to measure velocity, we need to measure scope, we need to measure work in progress, but not many really understand what are we doing with them. I believe if you go to any Scrum team at any given point, especially with the adoption of tools that just make it super easy and just make it super straightforward, every Jira board in this world will have a burn down chart after you close the sprint. So technically everyone is measuring it and everyone is looking at it and everyone have this data in front of them. But when it comes to actually, why did we do this? Not many can answer this question. So for me, the biggest mistake would be actually measuring something without having a goal in mind, and measuring something that even if there is some potential goal, it's not structured or it's not formalized or it's not on the paper, then nothing here really matters. Think about it almost like about the project. Yes, we're working in agile world and we accept that environment can change and our goals can change and people can change. However, if you don't really understand where are you going, then why are you even doing something? So the same goes with the data. From my perspective, the biggest mistake is really when people just measuring data, not really having an idea how is it supposed to help. And if you summarize this, when people just measuring everything together without having any specific action plan, that would be probably kind of a
Agree.
magic couple.
Correct. So basically the focus on matrices instead of the outcome. So organization, they just, get too caught up in collecting and analyzing matrices without linking them to the outcomes that matter to the business. So I think if they can focus on outcome-based matrices that can reflect the value delivered to the customer, maybe for example, customer satisfaction, revenue growth, or a customer retention, that's going to help them rather than having all these, vanity matrices that do not provide any actionable insight or the drive business value. So yeah, I think I'm with you on that.
Agree.
Great.
Since I had 20 seconds left, I'll try to add it there. So
Okay.
it's really important what you mentioned, that the real value is when you're measuring the outcome metrics. Of course, there are something that you need to measure to understand how you go in
True.
inside. So let's say with stack depth, this is not really the outcome. This is something internal. This is non-functional requirement. However, the outcome is the only measure that can help you understand how good is your business. So it's not only about what are you measuring, how are you measuring, but also how this outcome, the change of this outcome will impact your business.
True. I agree. Okay. So let's move on. So next question is little interesting. So you just mentioned about AI and automation, right? So nowadays, this AI and automation are more common in decision making. So how do you see this EBM evolving with this all these new technologies and different tools into the market?
I definitely believe that the most important thing here would be that we are able to process the amount of data on just absolutely on the scale this was not possible before. If previously it was one person who was creating some dashboards, yes, they probably done some calculations, maybe had a specific framework and approach how they treat this data. Nowadays, this technically can be handled by AI. In fact, I haven't had any tools that are already capable of doing it, but I believe you can with specific approach, you can train a model, or maybe you can create a custom GPT that can handle this for you. So the real importance here is that the amount of data we collect and the amount of data we process will increase significantly. However, as with all the tools, you're not able to make a progress unless you understand why you're doing this. So yes, you can start measuring 100 different metrics with AI, and you can help them to understand some specific trends. But it still comes to the problem that no matter how many items or how many metrics are we measuring, unless you understand the purpose and unless you have a specific strategy, you probably it will be hard for you to uncover the result. The really good metaphor that I read the other day about the AI is almost with every given innovation that we are getting at a specific point, people think that oh, it will change the world dramatically, but actually it gets usually in an absolutely different way. My favorite example is the one with house insulation technology. So when the first they've created house insulation technology, they thought, oh, our houses will be so much energy efficient, we will stop using heating. But at some point, people just decided to have panoramic windows at home. Yes, it's an innovation. It's a massive improvement in people's life, you know, the sunlight and you have the nice view, etc., etc. But we're still using heating because instead of saving the energy, we just decided to have better apartments, have better natural light. So AI here is something that's hard to make prediction, but it's really, I think, pretty straightforward to understand that unless you fulfill all the stuff that we've mentioned today, that you focus on what are you measuring, you limit the amount of metrics you are measuring, and you actually understand why you're measuring and what are you going to do with this data, probably even AI will not help you. Yes, it will make your life easier, and probably you'll save time, but are you going to get better results? This is somehow questionable.
Okay. Okay. So yeah, I'll agree with you. But then I think all this data driven decision making at scale is going to be changed for sure, because
Mm-hmm.
nowadays even the organizations struggle to get all this data and to make some decision based on data. They struggle a lot collecting this data. So if AI can, I'm sure like AI can process vast amount of data far faster than human. And of course in future EBM could leverage AI algorithms to analyze multiple sources of data in real time, and that can provide teams with data driven insight almost instantly, right? So this will definitely going to enable the faster and the more accurate decision making, and that also reduce the human bias. Sometimes we are whether we like it or not, we are biased. So yeah, and I think that's going to help in increasing the confidence in taking a lot of decisions. And of course we can leverage AI in predictive analytics and in the forecasting. So of course, as you mentioned, the future is belong to tools, but then at the end we should know like what we are going to do with that data. So yes, along with you on your same points, Victor. Okay, so I think we just keep this session short and sweet. So let's yeah, we'll we meet you again, Victor, in the next session. So till then, thank you, friends, for joining us for today's session. We hope you found it useful, helpful, informative, And if you enjoy this session, please don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel. And we hope to see you in our next session. Until then, take care. This is Anand Sharma signing off along with Victor. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Sunant.
Victor.